The first thing my brother slid across the coffee table was not an apology. It was an employment application. The paper was warm from his printer, still, curled at the edges, and the black ink smelled faintly chemical under the stronger odor of lemon furniture polish and roasted prime rib. My father's living room was full of people who had come to celebrate his 61st birthday, but every conversation had thinned into one uncomfortable hum, the way a restaurant gets. Quiet when a glass breaks. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked behind me like it was counting down to something nobody else could hear. Brandon smiled as if he had just saved my life. "Come on, Claire," he said, tapping the application with one manicured finger. "Help desk technician. $42,000 a year. Benefits after 90 days. Real work, real money. No more pretending your little AI hobby is going to become the next miracle." I looked at the paper. Then I looked at him. Brandon was 3 years older than me and had worn that fact like a medal since childhood. He had the kind of face people called confident until they had to sit across from it for more than 10 minutes. Navy blazer, gold watch, new teeth, the expensive haircut of a man who believed the world owed him flattering lighting. My mother stood behind him with both hands, wrapped around a wine glass. My father sat in his leather recliner, the throne he had bought after his retirement from municipal contracting, his expression arranged into concern. My Aunt Diane, my Uncle Paul, my cousin Jeremy, and Brandon's wife Melanie formed a half circle around the sofa where I had been sitting, with my laptop balanced on my knees. They called it concern. It was an ambush. 20 years earlier, when I was 12, Brandon got a brand new silver laptop for Christmas because he had a future. I got a used desktop tower from the Goodwill on Cedar Avenue because my father said I would probably only use it for games anyway. That machine had a broken fan, a cracked side panel, and a hard drive that sounded like gravel in a blender, but I learned to code on it while Brandon used his laptop to download music and complain that the screen was too small. The pattern never changed. At 32, I was still the daughter who hadn't settled down. Brandon was the son with the big house in Bellevue, the leased range, Rover, the wife who practiced corporate law, and the LinkedIn profile that read like a campaign poster. He was a regional marketing director for a medical device company, which meant he spent most of his life making other people's products sound more miraculous than they were. I built things that worked. They never asked what those things were. That afternoon, I had spent most of Dad's party in the corner of the living room near the old floor vent, answering encrypted messages from my general counsel and our acquisition team. The vent clicked every 3 minutes when the point furnace kicked on, sending up dry heat that smelled like dust in winter. On my screen were final notes for a transaction that had taken 11 months, 3 federal export control reviews, 2 antitrust memos, and 417 pages of legal language to complete. Atlas Cloud was buying my company for $3.86 billion. Nobody in that room knew. To them, Helix Mind Systems was still Claire's internet thing, a fantasy I had refused to abandon after 8 years of scraped meals, delayed vacations, and family dinners where everyone talked over me. They did not know about our 263 employees, our 8 approved patents, our secure contracts with hospitals and logistics firms, or the natural language system we had built to read catastrophic insurance claims in under 14 seconds. They had seen the public website, deliberately plain and almost empty, and decided the company was empty too. That was their first mistake. "You can start next Monday," Uncle Paul said. "I spoke to Kevin in IT. He's willing to overlook the gaps on your resume because you're family." My resume had been reviewed that morning by the board of Atlas Cloud. I folded my hands on top of my laptop. "That was kind of you, Paul, but I'm not looking for a job." Brandon laughed. Not loudly. Worse than that. He laughed like he was trying to be patient with a child who had spilled juice on a carpet. "You're not looking because you're not living in reality," he said. "You're 32, Claire. You rent a sad little apartment in Southlake Union. You drive a 12-year-old Civic, and you still show up to family events with that same laptop like you're one meeting away from becoming famous." I owned the building my apartment was in. My Civic was old because it had belonged to my first engineer, Nina, who died before we closed our seed round. I kept it because she had taped a photo of her dog to the dashboard and because not everything valuable needed leather seats. My portfolio manager had called me 2 days earlier to ask whether I wanted to move another $4.2 million out of municipal bonds before the dock acquisition closed. I said nothing. My mother's voice softened. "Honey, we're trying to help before you embarrass yourself any further." That sentence landed harder than Brandon's application. It always did, coming from her. She had a way of dressing cruelty in a sweater and calling it warmth. Dad cleared his throat. "Your brother is right. There comes a point when persistence becomes denial." Melanie tilted her head. "I see failed founders at my firm all the time. They all talk like you. Secret meetings, big investors. One more launch, one more miracle. Then the bankruptcy notices start arriving. The room smelled like gravy, cold coffee, and judgment." Brandon leaned forward. "Show us something. One contract, one investor, one actual proof that Helix Mind is worth more than the paper you printed your business cards on." I could have opened the secure folder in 12 seconds. I could have shown them the Atlas letter of intent signed by Marjorie Vale, their chief strategy officer. I could have shown them the wire schedule, the patent portfolio, the enterprise client list, and the board resolution approving my payout. I could have told them that my equity alone would clear just over $912 million before taxes. Instead, I closed my laptop. "I can't show you yet." Brandon's smile widened. "Of course you can't." Aunt Diane gave a little sigh. Melanie covered her mouth as if she were hiding pity instead of amusement. Dad rubbed his forehead. Mom looked away. Then Brandon said the sentence that finally moved something inside me out of sadness and into architecture. "Claire, your startup is another failed project, just like the rest of your life." The clock ticked. The furnace clicked. My pulse stayed level. I stood, put the laptop under my arm, and picked up the application with 2 fingers. "Did you print this yourself?" Brandon blinked. "What?" "The application," I said. "Did it come from your office printer or Paul's?" He frowned. "Why does that matter?" "It probably doesn't." Folded the page once and slipped it into my bag. "But details usually matter later." Nobody understood that. They would. I left at 6:18 p.m., walked past the porch light, buzzing with 2 trapped moths, and stepped into the cold Seattle rain without raising my hood. Behind me, someone said my name. Maybe my mother, maybe my father. I did not turn around. The rain smelled like wet cedar and exhaust. My phone began vibrating before I reached the curb. The first message was from Miriam Bell, my general counsel. "Atlas wants final confirmation by 8. Board packet ready. Signature room opens at 7:30. The second was from Owen Park, our CTO. Press embargo locked. TechWire, Forbes, CNBC, Bloomberg, all under NDA. Nobody leaks before 9 a.m. The third was from an unknown number. Stop making the family look stupid. Take the job. I stared at that message under the street lamp while water ran down the glass of my phone. Then a fourth message appeared. "This is Brandon. Don't ignore me. Dad is worried enough to consider legal options if you keep acting unstable." There it was, the word unstable. The old family lever. At 7:02 p.m., I pulled into the underground garage of my building, parked beside the Civic's familiar dented bumper, and sat without moving. The garage smelled like concrete, rainwater, and the faint rubber burn from someone's tires. A fluorescent light hummed over parking space. B17. Somewhere near the elevator, a pipe ticked in the ceiling. I opened my laptop before I opened my car door. Not to prove myself, to audit them. By 7:26, I had downloaded the metadata from the employment application Brandon gave me. He had not been careful. The PDF had been created at 4:03 p.m. on a company printer registered to Northline Medical Devices using Brandon's corporate login. The document properties showed a template path, a user ID, and a network address. 10.44.18.203. It also showed an embedded page that had not printed because the toner tray misfed. That page was not an application. It was an authorization form. My name was at the top. Under it, in clumsy legal language, was a statement authorizing Brandon Mercer to negotiate on my behalf regarding all business, tax, employment, and intellectual property, matters connected to Helix Mind Systems. The signature line contained my full legal name in a digital script font I had never used in my life. I stopped breathing for 1 second, only one. Then I sent the file to Miriam. Her answer came in 40 seconds. Do not respond to your family. Preserve device logs. I'm pulling outside counsel. This just became criminal. I went upstairs, made coffee I did not drink, and opened the security archive I had built after our Series B. My company stored everything: document access logs, IP traces, sign-in, attempts, phishing reports, domain, registrations, attempted social engineering, calls, vendor inquiries. Most founders hated paperwork. I trusted it more than people. At 8:11 p.m., I found the first connection. 3 weeks earlier, someone had tried to reset the admin password on our old public-facing domain from an IP address geolocated near Brandon's office building. 5 minutes later, the same address attempted to access a dormant investor portal using my childhood email address. 2 days after that, someone called our transfer agent claiming to be my authorized family representative and asking how founder shares could be reassigned before a sale. The call was recorded. The voice was Brandon's. At 8:37, Miriam joined the video call with 2 attorneys from Ralston Pike and Heller, a white-collar firm that billed in 6-minute increments and sounded like a locked door when they spoke. We reviewed the files in silence, except for the soft clicks of keyboards. The smell of coffee went sour beside me. Miriam finally said, "Claire, did your brother know about the Atlas deal?" "No." "Did anyone in your family?" "No." The senior attorney, Daniel Ralston, leaned toward his camera. He had silver hair, rimless glasses, and the expression of a man who had spent 30 years watching greedy people underestimate timestamps. Then either he guessed there was money coming or someone tipped him. I thought about my father's birthday party. Uncle Paul's little smile, Melanie's corporate law voice, Brandon's application printed with a hidden authorization form behind it. "Find out which," I said. By midnight, we had the answer. Melanie's law firm had done minor vendor work for Atlas Cloud 6 months earlier. She was not on the acquisition team, but she had access to a conflicts database that listed Helix Mind Systems and Atlas under a confidential internal matter code. She searched my company name 18 times in 4 days. Her login pulled a restricted summary showing a pending strategic transaction, parties, confidential, potential value range exceeding $2.5 billion. She told Brandon. Brandon tried to get control. That was their second mistake. The Atlas closing happened the next morning at 8:42 a.m. in a glass conference room on the 37th floor of our counsel's office downtown. The carpet smelled new. The coffee was too bitter. Rain tapped the windows like fingernails, while 22 people watched me sign my name in blue ink on a stack of documents thick enough to stop a bullet. At 9 a.m., the press release went live. Atlas Cloud acquires Helix Mind Systems in $3.86 billion AI infrastructure deal. By 9:07, my phone had 142 notifications. By 9:11, CNBC wanted me live from Seattle. By 9:18, Brandon called 7 times. I let every call go to voicemail. His first message was breathless. "Claire, what the hell? Is this real?" The second was softer. "Listen, whatever happened yesterday, emotions were high. We're family. Call me." The third came at 10:03. "You need representation. Melanie and I can help you make sure people don't take advantage of you." The fourth arrived at 10:41 and told me everything I needed to know. "Don't sign anything else until we talk. You don't understand taxes, Claire. Dad says we should handle this as a family office." A family office. They had gone from calling me a failure to trying to manage my billion-dollar exit in less than 2 hours. I was on Bloomberg at 11:30. I wore a gray sweater, flat black shoes, and the same raincoat from the birthday party because I did not owe television a costume. The anchor asked how I stayed focused through 8 years of doubt. I smiled politely. I kept records. That line became a headline. By noon, my mother was texting as if punctuation had personally betrayed her. We are so proud. Why didn't you tell us? Your father is crying. Brandon feels terrible. Please come to dinner Sunday so we can celebrate properly. I typed one answer. I have a board debrief Sunday. Then I deleted it. I typed another. No. Then I sent it. The public celebration lasted 6 days. Interviews, investor calls, employee bonuses, retention packages, tax planning, integration, meetings, and one carefully worded internal speech where I thanked every engineer by name and cried only after the camera turned off. Those people had believed me when belief cost something. My family believed me only after disbelief became embarrassing. I noticed the difference. On the 7th day, a letter arrived by courier. It came in a cream envelope with Melanie's firm, embossed in the corner. The letter claimed that Brandon Mercer had provided substantial unpaid strategic advisory support to Helix Mine Systems during its formative years and was therefore entitled to compensation from the Atlas transaction. The amount requested was $18.7 million. Attached was a consulting agreement dated 4 years earlier, bearing my signature. The signature was not mine. The agreement said Brandon had advised me on market positioning, enterprise sales, and pharmaceutical partnerships. In reality, Brandon had once told me my pitch deck looked depressing because there were no sexy charts. That was his entire contribution. I placed the forged agreement into a red binder. The binder was not symbolic at first. It was just the closest one on my shelf. Red vinyl, 2-inch spine, silver rings. By the end of that week, it held the employment application, the hidden authorization form, the transfer agent call transcript, Melanie's conflicts database access logs, domain reset attempts, the forged consulting agreement, and a notarized statement from a forensic document. Examiner explaining why the signature failed. Under pressure analysis. I made 3 copies. One went to my attorney. One went to a safe deposit box at KeyBank. Box 0442 under dual control. One stayed with me. On Tuesday, Dad called from his landline. I answered because Miriam told me recorded conversations could matter if Washington's consent rules were handled correctly through counsel. The call opened with 10 seconds of silence and the faint sound of television news in the background. Claire, Dad said, this has gone too far. What has? Punishing your brother. I looked at the red binder on my kitchen table. Outside, a garbage truck hissed by in the rain. How am I punishing him? He helped you. Maybe you don't remember it that way, but families help each other. He says he gave you marketing advice for years. He called my company another failed project 9 days ago. Dad sighed, exhausted by facts. People say things when they're worried. Did he forge my signature because he was worried? The television went silent. Then Dad said, "Be careful how you talk about your brother." There it was again, the family altar. I did not raise my voice. Tell Brandon and Melanie to withdraw the claim by Friday at 5 p.m. And if they don't? It looked at the binder. Then I will stop treating it like a family matter. Friday came. Nothing was withdrawn. At 5:14 p.m., Melanie sent a revised demand. This one increased the number to $24 million and warned that if I refused, they would share information with federal tax authorities regarding undisclosed founder compensation and offshore asset movement. It was nonsense, but it was specific nonsense, the kind written by someone who believed legal stationery could turn lies into leverage. Daniel Ralston read it and smiled for the first time since I had hired him. Excellent, he said. I frowned. Excellent? They put the extortion in writing. The public stage presented itself 2 days later. My father insisted on hosting a family celebration at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. He left a voicemail saying it would heal things and show everyone we Mercers stand together. I knew what he wanted. Photos, a toast, a public reset where Brandon could stand next to me and appear close enough to benefit from my shadow. Miriam advised against going. Daniel advised going only if we controlled the room. I chose the room. The Fairmont's Georgian room smelled like beeswax, white roses, and expensive butter. Crystal chandeliers threw light over polished silverware. The carpet swallowed footsteps. At the front, my father had arranged a small podium, a photographer, and 34 relatives who had spent years treating my ambition like a contagious illness, but now smiled at me as if they had been early investors. I arrived at 7:04 p.m. The red binder was in my left hand. Brandon saw it and laughed. Still carrying homework? Melanie touched his sleeve, warning him with her eyes. She wore a green silk dress and the strained smile of someone who had checked the news too, many times, and still decided she could win. My mother hugged me too tightly. "Tonight is about family," she whispered. "No," I said quietly. "Tonight is about records." She pulled back. She finally heard me. Dinner began with salmon, roasted asparagus, and small talk so fake it could have been laminated. Forks touched porcelain. Wine was poured. People congratulated me with the anxious cheer of gamblers who had bet against the wrong horse and now wanted a refund from the winner. At 7:41, Dad walked to the podium. He tapped the microphone. A soft pop moved through the room. "I want to say how proud we are of our daughter, Claire," he began, reading from a card. "Our family always believed in hard work, loyalty, and standing together through difficult seasons." I watched Brandon straighten his jacket. Dad continued, "And I especially want to recognize Brandon, who, as Claire's older brother, offered guidance and support during her data's journey. Sometimes success is not built alone. Sometimes it is built by family." A few relatives clapped. Brandon stood. That was the moment. Not because he stood, but because of what he said next. "I never wanted credit," Brandon said, one hand pressed to his chest. "But yes, I helped Claire when nobody else understood what she was trying to build. I advised her on market strategy, positioning, investor language, all of it. That's what families do. We lift each other." Melanie's smile froze. Dad nodded proudly. My mother dabbed at her eyes. I opened the red binder. The rings made a small metallic click. Some sounds end eras. I stood and walked to the front without hurry. My shoes made almost no sound on the carpet. The photographer lowered his camera. A waiter stopped beside the wall with a tray of champagne flutes balanced in one hand. "Brandon," I said into the microphone, "what was the date of the consulting agreement you claim I signed?" His face flickered. "Claire, come on. This isn't the time." "What date?" Melanie stood halfway. "Do not answer that." I turned one page. "The date on the document your attorney sent is March 14th, 2022. It says I signed it in person at your Bellevue office at 2:30 p.m. Brandon swallowed. "I don't memorize paperwork." "I do." The room went still. I lifted the first page from the binder. On March 14th, 2022, at 2:30 p.m., I was in Conference Room 6B at the Washington State Convention Center giving a closed-door technical presentation to 118 enterprise clients. There is security footage, badge data, catering, receipts, and a photograph from the event, published by TechWire at 2:47 p.m. No one moved. I placed the page on the podium. "This is the badge log." I placed another page beside it. "This is the handwriting analysis." Another. "This is the printer metadata from the employment application you gave me at Dad's party, showing a hidden authorization form with my forged signature." Another. "This is the transfer agent call transcript, or you claim to be my authorized family representative." Another. "This is the access report from Melanie's law firm showing 18 unauthorized searches of a doc. Confidential Atlas transaction matter." The room became so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in someone's water glass. Brandon looked at Melanie. Melanie did not look back. Dad stepped toward me. "Claire, stop this right now." I turned to him. "You told me to be careful how I spoke about my brother." I was careful. I documented him. My mother whispered, "Honey, please." I did not look away from Brandon. You had until Friday at 5 p.m. to withdraw the claim. Instead, Melanie sent a revised demand for $24 million and threatened to report false tax crimes unless I paid. Aunt Diane gasped. Uncle Paul stared at his plate. Brandon finally found his voice. That's not what happened. A man near the entrance said, It is close enough for tonight. Everyone turned. Daniel Ralston stood by the door with 2 federal agents and a Seattle police detective. The agents wore plain suits, not windbreakers, which somehow made them more frightening. One carried a folder. The other watched Brandon with the calm patience of a closing elevator. Daniel walked forward. Mr. Mercer, Ms. Mercer-Grant, I'm going to advise you not to make any further statements in this room. Melanie's face drained of color. The first agent stepped beside Brandon. Brandon Mercer? Brandon looked at my father as, if Dad could still outrank reality. What is this? The agent continued. We have a warrant related to wire fraud, attempted extortion, identity theft, and conspiracy to obtain property through forged instruments. Please place your hands where I can see them. My mother made a small, broken sound. Dad said, There must be a mistake. The detective answered without emotion. There usually is. The handcuffs clicked once around Brandon's wrist. Then again, Melanie took one step backward and hit the edge of a chair. I'm an attorney, she said, as if that were armor. The second agent said, We know. When they cuffed her, the champagne waiter turned his face toward the wall. Not to be polite, to hide the expression that passed over it, Brandon did not apologize. Not then. He stared at me with wet, furious eyes, and for 1 second I saw the 12-year-old boy with the silver laptop, outraged that I had touched something he believed belonged to him. He had not wanted justice. He had wanted proximity to my money without the humiliation of admitting I had earned it. That was his final mistake. The fallout was not cinematic at first. It was paperwork, search warrants, device seizures, bar complaints, HR investigations, tax interviews, insurance notices, resignation letters written in careful language. Melanie's firm suspended her within 24 hours and terminated her after the forensic report confirmed unauthorized access to the conflicts database. Brandon's employer placed him on leave then, fired him for using company systems to create fraudulent documents. Their house in Bellevue went on the market 6 months later. The Range Rover disappeared first, then the club membership, then the vacation photos. Brandon pled guilty to 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of aggravated identity theft after. Prosecutors agreed to drop several lesser charges. Melanie accepted a plea related to unauthorized access and attempted extortion, surrendered her license pending disciplinary review, and paid restitution she could not afford without selling her retirement account. Neither went to prison for decades like people in comment sections wanted, but consequences do not need drama to be permanent. A felony record is quiet. It still locks doors. My father aged 10 years in 9 months, not because Brandon had committed crimes, but because the world had seen him fail at the one job he valued most, protecting the golden child from consequences. He called me twice after the arrests. The first time, he said I had destroyed the family. The second time, 3 months later, he asked whether I would help Brandon with legal fees. I said no both times. My mother sent long emails with subject lines like healing and moving forward, and family is all we have. I read them with coffee cooling beside me. The city waking beyond my windows, gulls crying, somewhere over Elliott Bay. In every email, she mentioned forgiveness. In none of them did she mention the forged signature, the threats, the dinner table, humiliation, or the fact that they had believed I was worthless until a press release corrected them. So I stopped answering. For a while, the silence felt cruel. Then it felt clean. 1 year after the acquisition, Atlas finished, integrating Helix Mind into its cloud platform. Our claim reading engine processed 2.7 billion documents in the first quarter after launch. I started a new company in a smaller office with fewer glass walls and better coffee. I hired young engineers who reminded me of myself before money complicated the room, and I told every one of them the same thing during orientation. Keep records, not because you distrust everyone, because memory gets rewritten by people with louder voices. Some laughed. The smart ones wrote it down. I moved out of the apartment building I owned and into a quiet house on Bainbridge Island with cedar trees behind it and a kitchen window facing the water. In the mornings, the air smelled like salt and good pine. At night, the fairy lights crossed the dark like slow-moving stars. I still drove Nina's Civic on weekends, though. My new assistant begged me to buy something safer, and every time the dashboard rattled, remembered the people who helped me build before anyone clapped. Those were my people. Not everyone related by blood gets to be family. 18 months after the Fairmont dinner, Brandon wrote me a letter from a mandatory financial crimes accountability program his probation officer had recommended. The envelope was plain. His handwriting was smaller than I remembered. He did not ask for money. That is why I read it. He wrote that he had hated my success before it even arrived because it threatened the story he had been telling himself since childhood. He wrote that calling me a failure had been easier than admitting he did not understand what I was building. He wrote that when he saw the acquisition number, he did not feel pride first. He felt panic because if I was not the family failure, then he no longer knew who he was. It was the first honest thing he had ever given me. I did not forgive him that day. I did not have to, but I placed the letter in a different folder, not the red binder. The red binder stayed in my office safe, a record of what happened when people mistook quiet for weakness. Brandon's letter went into a blue folder labeled possible. That was all he had earned, possibility. My niece Lily called a month later. She was 11, bright, shy, and curious in the last careful way children become when adults have made too many rooms unsafe. She asked if I would come to her school's career day because she wanted to build robots in her. Dad said I was the smartest person in the family. I almost laughed. Then I went. I stood in a gymnasium that smelled like floor, wax, pencil shavings, and cafeteria pizza, and I told 37 fifth graders that inventions usually look stupid before they look obvious. I told them that useful work can be lonely. I told them that sometimes people who love you will still be wrong about you, and that you must learn the difference between advice and fear. Wearing a nicer coat. Lily raised her hand. What do you do when people laugh? I looked at her and thought of Brandon, Dad's recliner, the hidden authorization form, the Fairmont chandeliers, and the metallic click of binder, rings opening in a silent room. You keep building, I said, and you keep receipts. That afternoon after the students left, Brandon waited outside the day, Jim with his hands in the pockets of a cheap chim, gray coat. He looked thinner, older, less polished. For the first time in my life, he did not take up all the air around him. Thank you for coming, he said. I came for Lily. I know. A floor buffer started somewhere down the hall, low and steady. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Brandon said, I'm sorry for the party. The first one. And the second one. And everything between. I watched a janitor push a yellow mop bucket past a trophy case. The old version of me would have wanted a perfect apology, itemized and notarized. The newer version knew that some debts are real, even when no payment can restore what was lost. You were wrong about me, I said. I know. You didn't just make a mistake. You tried to take what I built. I know. You don't get to be close to my life because you finally understand its value. His eyes dropped. I know. That was enough for that day. Not forgiveness. A boundary. People think revenge is loud because movies taught them that justice needs fire, broken glass, and someone screaming in the rain. The revenge that changed my life was quieter. It smelled like printer toner, hotel roses, cold coffee, and courthouse floor wax. It sounded like keystrokes at midnight, a binder, ring opening, and handcuffs closing around a man who thought being family made him immune to the law. I did not destroy my family. I stopped letting them use the word family as a disguise. The day Brandon called my company another failed project, he believed he was naming my life. He thought I was broke because I was modest, weak because I was quiet, and available because I had spent years absorbing insults without returning them. He did not understand that I had built a company the same way I built my escape, line by line, proof by proof, backup by backup, until the structure could hold against any storm. Atlas paid $3.86 billion for the technology, but the real value was smaller and harder to buy. I learned that love without respect is just control with softer lighting. I learned that blood can explain history, but it cannot excuse harm. I learned that when people show you who they are, while they think you have nothing, you should believe that version before you believe the one. They perform when your name is in headlines. I still keep the red binder, not because I live in the past, because I survived it with evidence. And if you have ever been dismissed by the people who are supposed to believe in you, remember this: you do not need to shout your worth across a dinner table. Build quietly. Document everything. Let the truth arrive dressed better than revenge. If this story touched you, comment your age and where you are watching from, and tell me whether you have ever had to prove yourself to your own family. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about betrayal, quiet revenge, and the kind of karma that arrives with paperwork.